Hello everybody, it's AnAmericanThinks back again with another quick video. I did one like this, well, probably several months ago now, about Australia. And I'm not probably going to do these too often because it's not really the point of the channel, but every once in a while I run into something like this and, it's interesting to me. And so I make a video about it. And I came across this article, 33 Things Americans Should Know About Canada, Seriously. Is this BuzzFeed? Tickled.com. And I thought to myself, okay, well, let's see what this is about. Because I actually, I reference Colorado a lot, but I actually spent all of my formative years growing up in Minnesota. And we went up to Canada a lot for camping and whatnot. And then I actually went to school in Canada for my first 2 years of college. So I've been around Canada quite a bit. I think I've been to just about all the mainland provinces of Canada. And I still have some very good friends up there. So I thought, so what can this article have for me that I don't already know about Canada? And I ran into some very interesting things. So anyways, I'll try to go through these as quick as possible. I didn't want to make this a super long video, but here we go. Number one, our president is called a prime minister. No, your prime minister is called a prime minister. You don't have a president. But I think this is referencing, of course, the leader of the country. So fair enough. Number two, Baltimore, Maryland has more murders in a week than the entire nation of Canada does all year. On average, probably true. Every once in a while, Baltimore has an off week, so maybe then it's not true. But sure, I can feel comfortable giving that to you as well. Number three, you don't have to be born in Canada to be a prime minister. Number four, Canadians do not find "say a" for me to be particularly funny. And I get that, especially going to school up there. There's actually a lot of Americans that were going to school at the university where I was at. And, every once in a while you run into somebody who comes up there their first year and they do stuff like this. And I don't think really anybody finds it that funny, but whatever. Number five, Canada has rednecks too. Also true, actually. I was going to school in Alberta, which I think is probably one of the more rednecky provinces. But yeah, there are Canadian rednecks. Probably just about every country has some kind of a redneck element somewhere. But anyhow, number six, we are a lot bigger than you in landmass, but our population is considerably less. Now, I don't get this first part, we're a lot bigger than you in landmass. I think they mean land area, which really they're not that much bigger. I think this is probably referring to the lower 48 United States. If you compare the land area of Canada to land area of America, it's like 9.9 million square kilometers versus 9.8 million square kilometers, something like that. It's very easy to Google. It's, a lot bigger than you. I guess I would take issue with that. But anyways, this next one here is a real doozy. I have some words for this one. Number seven, in the War of 1812, we kicked your butts. The reason why your White House is white is because we set fire to it and it was whitewashed to hide the damage for propaganda purposes. Some Americans will say they won the... Actually, this is going to be too long. Let's just stop there at that part. In the War of 1812, Canada kicked America's butts somewhat. Typically, when Americans tried to invade Canada. At that time, America didn't have a sufficient population to make an effective invasion of Canada and vice versa. Canada couldn't really make an effective invasion of America. If it hadn't been for the British Navy at the time, there wouldn't have been much of a war to speak of in any case. It was really a matter of the British Navy doing what it did best, being the dominant navy in the world. The Canadians didn't set fire to the White House. It was British regulars and Marines that effected the invasion of Washington, D.C. and burned it and burned the White House and so forth. Now, they were based out of Canada, so you can't definitively say there were no Canadian recruits that had enlisted in these regular British units and that there were no Canadians whatsoever in the sacking of Washington, D.C. But generally speaking, it was British, not Canadians, and it wouldn't have happened at all if it hadn't been for the British Royal Navy. And then this final part here, the whitewashing of the White House. The White House had always been whitewashed. That was why it was called the White House to begin with, because they wanted to make it look white. Otherwise, it would have looked brown because of the stone that they used to build the White House. And white was obviously a more regal color. It was actually something that was very common to do for buildings of that time. So, obviously after the White House was burned, they had to whitewash it again to make it look white again, but it was always that way. So, anyhow, probably one of the more egregious items on this list, but I digress. Let's go to the next one. Number 8, a form of baseball was played just outside Toronto, Ontario, 3 weeks before Alexander Doubleday played the first game of baseball in your country. Cool. Number 9, we do not find the term Canuck Derogatory like Americans find Yank derogatory. Well, I guess that's true in a sense about the Canucks. I don't, I don't really know Americans who find Yank derogatory. And actually, if you're outside of the northeastern United States, the term Yank is kind of a misnomer. Um, it really, and particularly people of New York, but the northeastern United States in general, the term sort of applies, but various regions of the United States have their own kind of sub-identities, if you will. The South has its own identity, and the West, where I've spent most of my life, generally doesn't identify with either one. They're kind of off on their own as well, and they don't really identify as Yanks. But in any case, maybe at one point it was derogatory. I don't think anyone really cares now. Number 10, we are not just like Americans. We have our own national identity. We just haven't figured out what it is yet. Um, Actually, that's true. And living up in Canada for a while, you can see where that's true. And usually, when having conversations with people and whatnot, um, I can kind of place fairly quickly if somebody is from Canada, if they're visiting the United States or something, you can kind of tell there are subtle differences. I think where this comes from is, if you spend any amount of time, if you're an American, let's say, and you spend any amount of time traveling around the world, um, Canadians that you meet are going to be more similar to Americans than most other people that you're going to meet. And it makes sense, we share this huge border, and there's a lot of crossover between America and Canada, so it makes sense. But just like Americans know, that is actually true. They do have their own national identity, and there are some distinct differences. Um, 11, our national animal is the beaver. Number 12, we do not find the fact that American wear Canadian flag pins so they can get better treatment in Europe very amusing, so stop it. And this is probably another one. I think there were three of them on here, but this is the second of the three that I find particularly egregious. This one, I had never even heard of this before I went to Canada. And then all of a sudden, my Canadian friends were telling me that Americans do this. I'm like, really? Well, I don't ever remember doing this. No, obviously, I'm not the world's most well-traveled person. I'm not the Rick Steves of the world. I'm an American Thinks. Um, but I've been to some countries, and I have family members. Like my older brother did the whole backpacking across Europe thing, and my younger brother actually lived in England for a while, and he did a lot of traveling around Europe. And my dad, before he retired, he was logging a couple 100,000 miles a year for his business. So, I know a lot of people that are even more well traveled than I am, significantly more well traveled than I am. And none of them have had to wear American flag pins to get good treatment. And actually, the only one of these people that I talked to, my older brother said when he was backpacking around Europe, the only Americans that he ever saw wearing Canadian flag pins were a group of people who were trying to pickpocket people, and they were wearing Canadian flag pins. Um, but other than that, he hadn't seen it. And frankly, you don't have to pretend to be Canadian to get good treatment in Europe or anywhere. Getting good treatment is mostly a matter of being polite and respectful and having a genuine appreciation for other cultures. If you can do that, you're going to be treated well pretty much anywhere in the world. And if you're an asshole, you're not going to be treated very well, whether you're an American or you're a Canadian. So really, it's mostly a matter of the individual, not what kind of flag pin you're wearing. Just my 2 cents. Anyways, number 13, we have Thanksgiving in October, so we don't look like copycats. That's actually true. The college I went to, it was kind of cool because they gave you a Canadian Thanksgiving break and an American Thanksgiving break. And actually, before going up there, I didn't realize that was on 2 different months, so it was kind of interesting. Anyway, number 14, we were formed as a nation in 1867. 15, November the 11th is called Remembrance Day up here. It is a day when all Canadians honor our war dead and the veterans who are still amongst us. Number 16, not every Canadian speaks French. In fact, Canada is the only country where speaking French is not cool. unless you're in Quebec. Number 17, we spell words differently, and of course this is referring to the OU instead of the American O, like in honor, valor, color, etc. Number 18, the Queen of England is not our national leader. She's just a figurehead and somebody to put on our money with the birds. Number 19, our states are called provinces, and this is where I say no, your provinces are called provinces. You don't have states, but again, I think you can figure out what they're referring to. Number 20, we do not, this is funny, we do not have snow all year round. We do not live in igloos. We do not ride around on dog sleds. We do not have to pay we do not have to check the backyard for polar bears before we let our kids go out and play. Yeah, it's pretty funny. It's even more funny that some people actually believe that. 21, many Canadians have never played hockey in their lives. There are many who do not like hockey. I don't know if that's necessarily true. Probably just about every single Canadian I met played hockey at least at one point in their lives. Of course, I was in Alberta. This may be different wherever you live. But anyhow, there are many who do not like hockey. Yeah, that's kind of true. Although I will say, when I meet Canadians that claim they don't like hockey, I can still get them going talking about, their local hockey team or whatever. They're still aware of it. 22, besides our national sport is not hockey, it's lacrosse. And actually, you'll find out, like if you go up to school there like I did, you'll find out very early on. They really like to say this, and they reference this, oh, it's not our national sport, it's actually lacrosse. But the fact of the matter is everybody plays hockey, and some people play lacrosse. We didn't invent hockey, we just made it better, true. 24, even if an American team wins the Stanley Cup, it doesn't matter to us because all your best players are Canadian. Probably true, unless it's the Detroit Red Wings and they're all Russian. 25, on the other hand, if a Canadian team wins the World Series, we ignore the fact that all our baseball players are American or Dominican or Japanese or whatever. 26, stop asking if we know somebody in Canada when you find out we're Canadian. We don't know everyone in Canada. 27, we have no right to keep and bear arms, so leave your guns at home if you're visiting, otherwise they'll be confiscated at the border. We have very strict gun laws, and fully automatic weapons are pretty much illegal. Actually, they're fairly illegal in America too, unless you go through some pretty severe licensing. It takes an act of God to get a license to own a pistol. That's actually not entirely true. I have friends up there who own firearms, including handguns. It does take more licensing than it would in America, at least in most states in America. But then again, I was in Alberta, which is kind of one of the more rednecky provinces. 28. The border between Canada and the U.S. holds the title of the world's longest undefended border. Actually, very true and very important for both nations and our relationship with each other, but true. 29. Our side of Niagara Falls is nicer looking than your side. Also very true, actually. If you've been there, you probably know. And here we go, number 30. And this is the third of the egregious points here on this list. We own the North Pole, and therefore Santa Claus is Canadian. The internationally recognized mailing address for... Oh, well, anyways, they go on this whole thing. So, a few points on this. The North Pole is not a landmass. It is a bunch of ice that is floating around at the top of the world. And due to international treaties, countries cannot claim international waters as their water, so to speak. You can claim land, but you can't claim waters. So what these countries are actually doing is they're trying to claim continental shelves that lie underneath the Arctic Ocean as their land. And Canada isn't the only one doing it. I think Denmark tries to do it. Russia does it. There's a few countries that are trying to make these claims to, little slices. If you were taking a bird's eye view of the North Pole, it'd be kind of chopped up into, little pie slices because, different countries are trying to claim their own little slice of continental shelves that lie underneath the North Pole. But it's not the North Pole itself, and there's a lot of countries that are trying to do it. So this claim that we own the North Pole is a little bit misleading, actually a lot misleading. Anyways, 31, we call Eskimos Inuit because that's what they call themselves. 32, that movie that you thought was filmed in New York or Seattle or Chicago or Los Angeles may have just been filmed in Vancouver, Montreal, or Toronto. And actually, I know Vancouver especially is kind of a big film town. I think there's some tax laws or whatever that make it more cost effective to film in Canadian cities than in American cities, but whatever. And then, oh, wait a minute, we're 33. They said that this was 33 things Americans should know about Canada. But this is only 32, and then the list just stops. So, this is where I end my video with one thing Canadians should know as told by An American Thinks. Canada, learn how to math.